So this is the wonderfully unscripted part of the proceedings, where we'll take any questions that people will have around the room. But just to kick things off, I wanted to just have each of our jurors just share one thing you'd like to convey about your experience. And aside from that, I'll start to look for hands in the audience. I might start, I should do introductions, a little way. Sarah, Zedric, Mark, Caroline. All I ever hope people see is people you might have seen around the street, in the cafe, in the job. So would you like to share something, just one thing you might like to convey? Sarah?
Yes. We spent a lot of time on this report. I would like to hear a little bit more. I'll be looking forward to that booklet about the aspirational recommendations, because that was where the practical recommendations were for the next election. Aspirational recommendations were about beyond that, and that's where I think a lot of the jury see the big difference that we can make. So that's what we really, well, I know a lot of us are very interested in. So the response from the government on that is key, at least for me. But yeah, the jury was a long process and a very intense process, I have to say.
Cedric?
Something that I just want to really convey, I mean, this piece of paper that you're all holding in your hand, this has been written by me. I may have delivered your pizza at one point. I may have seen me at the Gordon studying and being a student. We wrote this all of ourselves. We got together, we collegiately worked together to write this. So I think it's just really important, as you read it, it's been written by us, people that it could have been you, but it was us. So I think that's just really important to remember.
I think it is important to note that 100 people, randomly selected from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds, can actually reach consensus on something. If the process is good, the output should be good as well. And I think this process was excellent. And I think the Minister reflected on the results of the survey in terms of participants of the jury process, saying that they would participate going forward in a similar process. If you think about 100 people and then you extend that out to the broader community and you say, if you want to do this 10 times, that's 1,000 people, exponentially, this could be the start of something really wonderful.
Good morning. I would like to say that I was actually proud to be part of the human race, because it was possible for all of us to discuss without any acrimony and to make decisions together that we felt good about. Even the fact that the mayoral issue was a problem, it's a problem in the greater community, it was a problem for us. And it took much, much longer, and we were given that time. I thought it was 4 hours, but you say 5 hours. Well, it was a long time because we could not agree. And in fact, we did all sorts of things to try and get to an agreement, and the only way we did in the end was to make conditions. And this is how we arrived. So it is possible for democracy to work and for you guys to work together like we worked together, because we had literally at one point people standing on one side of the room and people standing on the other side of the room. We had one incredible woman who got up and said, "This is why I think we should have a directly elected mayor." And then, she did it so well, I was almost convinced. She then walked to the other side of the room and said, "This is why we should not have a directly elected mayor." And all of us agreed with both sides. So where do you go from there? But the conditions that were put out by all of us made it possible for us all, 100 of us, to agree. And one more thing I'd like to say, Minister, is that it looks as though the aspirational was only hung on at the end. It most certainly was not, because in fact we looked at aspirational ways of doing things right at the start, and at the end was only putting them together, bringing them together properly, but it most certainly was not just the last day. We looked at all of them, and we were scared of the aspirational ones, but in the end we went way out over the top, trying to find the best way, because sometimes you have to go right out of your comfort zone to come back to something that is really going to be good. And at one point, I have to say I'm talking too long, aren't I? But I've got on a roll now because I feel so excited. I can't remember, I think it was Murray, because I was talking to him and I said, "I'm terribly worried I haven't read enough," because there was so much material for us to read. And he said, Caroline, don't worry, somebody else will have read that. And it's true, all of us together brought all the different ways together, and we listened so well to each other. I was proud to be part of the human race, and I was proud to be part of what democracy can be.
I think my job's at risk. I'm looking for questions. I saw a question here in the front. If anyone else has a question, I'll play mic runner. And you could introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Rosemary Kiss, Dr. Rosemary Kiss. I'm here as a resident citizen of Geelong and as a member of WILD, Women in Local Democracy. I want to really thank you all. In all your different ways, you've made a huge contribution to our future. Minister and the government for initiating the process, for accepting that this is a good way forward, and for all of you who have spent so much time making it happen. Now I have two quick questions, or two questions which concern or which arise partly out of the fact that we will be having an election in less than 6 months' time. One of the questions is to do with the ward boundaries and the EC doing their job, and when that might be expected to happen, because that's an important part of how we go forward. And the other question is whether the government can see itself, and it may be covered in the report, can the government see itself as assisting us now to try to ensure that future councillors are trained effectively or have a good training process leading up to standing for election, and also that we have structures, citizen-based structures that can facilitate effective communication with the council before and after.
Thank you. They're very good questions. Firstly, I'm not sure many people in the room know, but you actually have your own Act of Parliament, and it's an Act of Parliament that covers the greater city of Geelong and the structures of your council. Out of the other 79 councils, only Melbourne and Geelong have those capacities of having their own specific act in relation to how their council structures are. We need to amend that Act now based on the recommendations, because currently the Act provides for a directly elected mayor and single member wards, so that mechanism needs to change. We need to change the Act and take that through Parliament, and that will go through both be introduced into the lower house and then hopefully go unamended through the upper house, but there are other factors at play around the balance of power in the upper house. So it would be right for people to ask what the other political parties' positions are on supporting this model going forward. And in terms of your second part of your question around public engagement and making sure that there is training of candidates, and there is also ongoing citizen engagement post an election. Certainly, this is a matter that Graham and I worked hard on before last year's council elections, around encouraging councils to actually provide some training. We could not go down the track of making that training compulsory at the last election, because if you make it compulsory, state government then has to provide some funds, and quite frankly there wasn't enough time in that process. But in the future, that is something we're definitely looking at. But for the first time at the last year's elections, which I know didn't apply here, but in other municipalities, we asked candidates to fill out a form and say whether they'd had training, whether they'd had experience, and that was available to the public to look at. So that had never been done before, and many of the councils did supply some training, because we do have a situation where some councillors nominate, or candidates nominate, they become elected, and then they are a little bit stunned about what is involved, and they're not willing to participate or give the time that is actually required to do the job, because they were ill-informed before they started. So there is a range of things that we will do as a state. I don't want to preempt the work of any council that is yet to be elected, but we'll be strongly encouraging them to continue to both do the public consultation, and of course work with the administrators on this side of an election to ensure candidates can have access to training.
Thank you. I'm going to take one question here, and the lady over to the right will come after.
Thanks, Sir. Minister, congratulations. Sensational. And particularly on behalf of us who live on the Bellarine, proud residents of the Bellarine, that we've now got the Bellarine ward almost back again to what it was. So well done again. Right, I'll get to the question then. The question is, have you considered the phasing in of councillors and the phasing out of the administrators? If you haven't, would you consider that?
I'm not sure practically how phasing in and out, and I don't know that you can be half pregnant when it comes to democracy. How you would have some councillors working alongside of administrators. But I'm yet to receive the full 12-month report on how council has progressed under administration. That anniversary is coming up in April, and I'm keen to see what has been achieved in the 12 months. But certainly our requirements under the Act at this stage are to return to elections in October this year.
So I'm going to go to the lady over here, and also want to encourage people, particularly if someone came along a little sceptical. You've got a few jurors here who are wonderfully unvarnished. I know they've said lovely things already, but if you've got a pointy question, they are very reliable and honest answers. So feel free to also direct your questions around. Go to you.
Thank you. Yes, I do have a question of the jury people. Thank you very much. Congratulations to the Minister for accepting the recommendations of the report, which validates the whole process and gives the community confidence. I think that's terrific. And congratulations to the jury people for your great presentation this morning and your decisions. My question is, which of you are going to stand for council? I think you're quite outstanding, and we need people of your quality, impartial, to stand for council.
Well, me personally, I'm a sort of a lowly student at the moment, and I feel like I could experience Geelong to a greater extent, I guess, before I would run for something as important as council. This process has taught me, if anything, how important having suitable candidates and councillors is. I mean, that's sort of what led to this whole thing, having unsuitable councillors. So me personally, I guess I would consider it maybe, but after, I guess, some life and maybe even formal education as well, just because I know how important it is.
I think there were suitable councillors, just as that's fun, you know, let's not be too hasty about that. But there's certainly a big education bit, the component that comes out of it that we've learned about as the jury, and I think that's really important for any future councillor, is to, you know, have that education.
All done, Carol?
Well, yes. Yes and no. I do a lot of other things in the community. I would have to maybe stop doing that. I'm only just beginning to be able to speak in public with any sort of, you know, I watch the minister, you know, move forward without a flaw, and I think that's quite difficult to do, so I do have to learn that. What I will do, though, is I will go to council meetings. That I have learned, because if you don't go to council meetings, you have no ability to say, this is what you're doing, you need to do this. So that is what all of us should do, and that is go to the council meetings. But if our aspirational views come through, all the meetings will be online, and it will be possible for all of us to be able to see what's going on, because we need to keep track of what's going on instead of letting it go out there because we've got too much else happening here with our own lives.
So I'm going to take one more question publicly, and then there's lots of time over a coffee to meet lots of the jurors informally. So I see 2 microphones have gone out, so I actually think I'm going here for that question.
Thank you. Minister, I'd like to congratulate you and the jury for sterling work. I'm a great believer in the Westminster system. I fought for it in Vietnam. I don't like directly elected mayors. I don't like the American electoral system. And I'll always fight for the Westminster system. I'll tell you why I don't like directly elected mayors is the cost. You have to have big pockets to stand for these positions. And in Geelong, that stops grassroots people from becoming a mayor of the city. And I think you and your jury have done a darn good job. Well done.
Given that statement, I'm going to ask one more question. No, you've got the microphone, sir. It's all yours.
My name is Alec Sandner. I became a full-time resident of Geelong on the 2nd of December last year, so I'm a new boy amongst you, but I was Mayor of the City of Bendigo 2011-12 and President of the Shire of Strathfield, say, in 1985, prior to the amalgamation, and so I have a little bit of knowledge about local government. I'm very pleased to hear the comments about changing the Local Government Act, because that desperately needs to have to be done, and if I had my way, I would give elected councillors the powers of the commissioners and pay them accordingly. What has happened in Bendigo is that the...
Can we move towards a question for the
Will
group?
that be done? Because it's a desperate need.
Thank you.
Thank you. And a good question. The reason I didn't go into all of the ins and outs of the aspirational recommendations is that the responses are technical, but in the main we support all but one. And some of them say in principle and some say full support. Why I said in principle to some of these and why the Cabinet agreed with me on that is because there is a fine line between what state government should be telling an individual council to do. Will we encourage the council, when there's elected councillors, when they come forward, to take on your recommendations? Yes, we will. Can we force them, or should we force them to do that? No, we shouldn't, because it's overstepping the boundaries between state and local government relations. But certainly we are modernising the Act. I know a lot of people don't get excited about pieces of legislation that are 27 years old, but unfortunately our Local Government Act is out of date. It has been subject to 101 amendments, and when you have an Act that's been changed that much, it becomes clunky and inefficient. And also it was written in a time where we didn't have social media, where we didn't have things like Google and online correspondence, online communication, which has really changed the face of the way councils interact with residents. So they're some of the changes we will be making. In terms of lifting the role of councillors and mayors, that has been a very serious part of our work in reviewing the Act. I don't know if many people realise in the room, but through public consultation, the expectation from residents of what a mayor can do is right up here, and the law is actually right down here of what they can do. So there's an absolute mismatch in what people's perceptions are and what they can really do. We want to change that. I've not been all that popular saying that I think mayors should have more power, but I do, because I think that needs to match the community expectation. If the community thinks a mayor has all of these powers and they don't, well, we need to address that. In terms of your last point around councillors being remunerated better, I think that's a discussion we should have. I've got the extremities, to be honest, where some councils want to pay their current councillors less because they're under financial strain, and I'm talking about predominantly the small rurals. But then again, there are major metropolitan and regional councils that could afford to pay their councillors more. And as I said earlier, there is massive expectation on councillors to be available 7 days a week, and they're not remunerated for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can see 8 hands around the room. We are going to wrap up the formal question and answer. Simply ask people informally. Ministers hang around for a cup of coffee. We're all around, but unfortunately there's limited time. I just have one little point I'd like people to reflect on before you wander out. When was the last announcement at any level of government when you saw a group of citizens happy to sit next to a minister on a really hard decision? Any level of government, generally people offer feedback through surveys, etc., but it doesn't mean you're willing to sit in the firing line. And this has been a firing line decision. And I just think that's a little element that hopefully government learns from. Absolutely, governments of the day have the power to set the agenda and make the decision. Will we trust decisions more when citizens have been involved to sufficient depth to sit up the front as well? And particularly the couple of you who were sceptical and said I might be rude, thank you especially. Thanks for it.